Good. Now let's just do very shortly. We'll just do one Mishnah. There is what's called a tractate of Mishnah, of Torah laws, Torah principles, which is called Pirke Avot, the chapters of the fathers. And it is a custom for religious Jews to learn this between the days of Passover and Shavuot, which is 7 weeks. And most have the custom, Chabad also does, to learn it from Passover to Rosh Hashanah. Right? Almost like 6 months. So once a week on Shabbat. And so these are they're not exactly laws. They're not laws. Usually Mishnahs are dealing with laws, and these are not laws. These are advice in life, attitudes toward life, basic values and principles and guiding axioms in Judaism. Right? Especially this is important because of what I told you before. When God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, he gave it in a very coded way that basically cannot be taken at face value all the time. Can't be taken at face value. In order to understand what the commandments mean, they have to be interpreted. And it says that God gave that interpretation to Moses. That when Moses was on Mount Sinai, he gave him the Torah, that's called the written Torah, and all of the interpretations, proper interpretations, that's called the oral Torah. And he also gave to Moses certain principles by which future generations could learn new laws or elucidate the laws that Moses gave them. For instance, there's hundreds, thousands of laws of Shabbat. A person who's fearing God will want to know what God wants from us for Shabbat. Okay, of course, throughout Judaism, from the first day number one, the Jews have had enemies. Enemies. I don't know if there's any other religion that had so many enemies as the Jews. You know, the other religions, I guess there were persecutions, but the Jews constantly had enemies, and especially the biggest enemies, let's say the biggest, but the most constant enemies are the Jews themselves. And from the time that the Jews left Egypt, they didn't want to go out, and they were always making trouble with Moses. And then after he gave them the Torah, they worshipped the golden calf, and they didn't want to go into the land of Israel. And then they went after Korach. And when they were in Israel, they were always worshiping idols and making trouble for the what's called the shoftim, the judges, and then the prophets, and then others. And through this whole business, there were always people, great masses, that wanted to change the Torah, or throw the Torah away, or dilute it, or deform the Torah. Okay. But nevertheless, there were always the God-fearing, faithful rabbis that adhered to the original attitude that Moses gave to the Jewish people, which is called fearing God, the fear of God. Or in simple English, to be afraid of driving on the wrong side of the street, to be afraid of going against the Creator, to be afraid of doing the wrong thing. Afraid of doing the wrong thing, right? If you live in America, I guarantee you will not drive on the left side of the street. You won't do it. Not for long, anyway. You won't do it. Why? Because it's a natural fear. Nobody says, hey, what are you, a coward? Want to drive on the left side of the street? In England, you do drive on the left side of the street. And it was what the law is, that's what you do, because you're afraid of going against life. Right? You're afraid of going against life. You're afraid of eating poison. That's what these laws are. God-fearing people, that they realize that to go against God is like poison, spiritual poison. And they see that God does not punish people anymore. People live to 100 years old, and they are, apostates and whatever you want to call it, and they live long, happy lives. So it's just to do what God wants, because that's what God wants. That's Judaism. Against all odds, against the whole world. It began by Abraham, that he was alone against the whole world. That's why it's called the Ivri. The word Hebrew means against the world. So let's go. Ready? Let's just do the first one. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. Moses received the Torah from Mount Sinai. Of course, the one that was on Mount Sinai. All the Jewish people were there. They all saw God. It says face to face. They heard God. Their souls jumped out of their bodies. Moses got the Torah from Sinai, and not only did he get the written Torah and Mount Sinai, but he got all the explanations on Mount Sinai. Because the written laws don't make any sense. Moses received the Torah, even more. It says, the first commandment of the 10 commandments is, I am God that took you out of Egypt. The second commandment is, don't worship other gods, but it's in the singular. Lo yelecha Elohim. It doesn't say lo yelechem. So it says, why does God say in the singular? So Rashi brings down that when the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf, God already had suspicions. When the Jewish people worshiped the calf, so you have a way out, right? You can give the Jewish people an excuse. They'll say, oh, we shouldn't worship the golden calf. Wow, we are the 10 Commandments. It says you shouldn't. God said, Lo yelecha, you, singular, Moses, you shouldn't have any other gods. And we just misinterpreted Moses. Wow, really sorry about that. So anyway, it left them a little bit of an opening. So what we see that God purposely gave the Torah a little bit unclear, but on the other hand, he did give definite, clear explanations of what everything is, what tefillin are, what Shabbat is, when it starts, what are you supposed to do, what is forbidden to do. Moses received the Torah from Sinai. He gave it to Joshua, Yehoshua. Yehoshua, he gave it to the Zakanim, to the elders. Who are the elders? After Moses died, as Joshua took the Jews to Israel, for the next 440 years, the Jewish people were ruled by people which were called the Shoftim, the judges. And if you count Joshua as one of the judges, then there's 15 of them. If Joshua was the first one, and the last one was Eli, he came after Samson. So there's 15 of these judges, 440 years, they were ruled by the judges, so-called judges. They made all the judgments and they told people what to do. Afterwards, there's two, the books of Judges, first and second books of Judges. Then after that, the elders, they gave it to the prophets. There were all these prophets, Shmuel, Samuel, there was the prophet. And after him came all these other prophets, Isaiah and etc. They were later on. Elijah the prophet, was it Elisha, Elijah, Eliyahu, anyway. And the prophets, there was Natan Hanavi, and the time of King David, Achia Shiloni, prophets. These prophets, that lasted up until the beginning of the Second Temple and into the Second Temple. The last three prophets were Haggai and Malachi and Zechariah, and they were already in the Second Temple. They were part of what's called the Men of the Great Assembly. Men of the Great Assembly. And the Men of the Great Assembly, they said three things. Be calm when you judge others. Don't jump to conclusions. Be sure to teach a lot of people Torah. Make a lot of pupils. And it says, Hamidu, stand up. The pupils should be standing on their own. They should be themselves connected to God and His Torah. V'asu sayig l'Torah, and also make laws on your own that protect the Torah. Make prohibitions that keep people away from transgressing the Torah. So three things were said to the people of the Great Assembly. The Great Assembly, that lasted for about the first 200 years of the Second Temple. These were people like Ezra. Now, just to remind you, it says these were people, most of them, maybe all of them, had the power to raise the dead. It says that even the lowest level of the what's called the Tanaim, the people that are called disparagingly, are called the Pharisees. They were tremendously holy people. They had the power to raise the dead, and there were actually some cases even people of the of the Amorites, the Amorites, the Amoraim. I don't know how they call it in English. That they came, that was after the destruction of the temple. Some of them also had the power to raise the dead. Raising the dead was no big deciding factor, a big deal in Israel, among the Jews. And Miru Talmidim, however, stand up a lot of, so they said three things. What did they say? These people of the great assembly in the beginning of the second temple, be, patient when you judge. Don't say, oh, I just had a case like that. Every case judge on its own, because judges are the main thing in Judaism. If you have bad judges, there can't be anything worse than bad judges. People, they take people's business away. They take people for no reason. They just pound the gavel. You're guilty for nothing. Just take everything away from a person. Hamidu told me to stand up a lot of pupils and make a sayag, make a fence around the Torah. Make a fence around the Torah. Make laws that keep people away, distant from prohibitions. One example is like muktzah. There's certain things you're not allowed to touch on Shabbat, which is, according to the Torah, totally permissible. The rabbis said, and it's a commandment for the rabbis to make these laws. It's not just that they made it on their own. So here we learn the first Mishnah of Pirke Avot, the chapters of the fathers, about Moses, from Moses to the men of the great assembly. This was a period of about 1,000 years, About 1,000 years. Okay, have a good day with Mashiach now. See you all tomorrow at 8:15. God bless you all.